Hello.
Hello, hello. Give me 1 second and I'll share it. Mm. Find Google Chrome because for one reason it shares the web like status bar for some reason for some of them. All right, cool. So let me set this up now. Um, mm, mm, mm. Actually, I'll just copy this. Mm. It is, man, HackMD is like a lot slower now because of the size, I think. So I need to really bug Andrea about this. Uh, oh my God.
Maybe it could be split because from what I see on the left, there are also for 2024 meeting
Oh
notes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's what we used to do before we paid, but Andrea said that we have a paid plan now, so we shouldn't be having this free plan character. Like it's asking about this upgrade. So he's gonna look into like why that is happening. Like it could be something very simple, or it could be a hack MD bug. I don't know. But yeah, I think definitely we could split it worst case scenario. Um, which I wonder if I should just do that now because this is pretty bad. Like it's really hard to use. But okay, we'll continue. And the worst case, I'll move things around. But I think we can continue. So in terms of 0.5, I got the internal approval. So I opened the verifiability PR to cloud events. So this means that the idea here is that events, when they are consumed, or produced. When they are produced, they are signed with some sort of signature. In this case, it's DSSE. That's the verifiability protocol that we decided to go with, and the consumer will be able to verify that it's coming from a correct sender. So let me find that PR just so we have it. Cloud events spec. Yeah, this one. So this is this PR. And then I am also going to uh call it verifiability to PR open to cloud events. Um I'm also going to open a PR, the exact same one for CDEvents. And the reasoning for that is that extensions technically could be added to cloud events without needing to be in the proposal it's or in the main spec itself. So the idea or the thinking was that if uh if they didn't accept it, right, we could still create uh a spec for us to use, but it would just be relative to CD events, which is fine. But having it in cloud events itself, like that, those would just be baked into the SDKs, and we wouldn't have to worry. So that's the caveat there. But like I said, it's not like end of the world if they don't accept it. So that's kind of the thinking there. And we would then just have it in our SDKs to add the appropriate spec headers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the thinking there. So, so yeah, so that's going to be an open PR for verifiability for both cloud events as well as for us. So I would like, you, Andrea, and whomever that's interested, to take a look at this. And best case scenario, they accept it, and we can just then merge ours in or close it. Probably closing it makes more sense. And then just reference the verifiability PR. Then I also got approval for 0.5, the ID. So I fixed that internally. I have the PR. I'm going to send it out after this meeting. So I will then have that closed out. It looks like Andrea didn't get to that versioning one renaming. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do that today as well because now that we got the ball rolling with the approvals, I think I could get that probably done today. And we can then just close out 0.5. So yeah. Oh, yeah, this is it's like highlighted in yellow here. I don't know if you can see that. It's like yellow, it's complaining. But yes, that's kind of the goal there. So whoops, that's not what I wanted. 0.5 internal PRs approved. So
About
that,
verifiability, I will look at it
okay.
because today for event in CDVs, what we are using is signatures like GitHub and maybe other, not GitLab, but and the signature cannot be embedded into the payload because we sign the payload, so
Yeah,
it
makes
could not
total
be
sense.
part
Yeah.
part of it. So it's
Yep.
part of the header today. So it's I'm curious to read the. I look at the previous version a few months ago, but I didn't take care a lot, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't see exactly how it could be implemented, etc. And for some part of CDVs, I completely disabled cloud event support because had it had it's overkill on some points. It's some bunch of headers that we don't use. I push
Yeah.
them, but I don't consume them. It's not clear. It's very confusing in terms of spec between all the supported format binary inside payload, header plus payload, etc. So it's not.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat as you. I really actually don't know why it was decided to use it. Because there's a lot of limitations that we have to adhere to that doesn't really make sense for CD events itself. One of them being that there is a payload size limit, which I'm like, why even have that like for CD events? I mean, it makes sense like for event like the event like paradigm, but it shouldn't really be a limit. It should at least be configurable, right? It shouldn't be like a hard limit. And so I agree, but that's the decision that we went with. Like this predates me.
Yeah.
And because of that, we just have to use it, right? And so in this case,
Yes, we have to deal with legacy.
exactly,
Most of us.
right. So yeah. So I'm in the same boat as you. I really don't understand why we ended up with it. I mean, I'm sure there's reasons. I just don't know of them. So but yeah. So with that said, we can. I'll also open the extent or the verifiability proposal um as well for us. And we did implement it internally too, so it does work. And then we also implemented the other one, so I'm just a little unsure why you weren't sure how to implement it. Maybe because we weren't clear on how to implement it, but we did implement it internally because the whole idea with signing, right? Like you're not creating the architecture or anything like that lives outside of the proposal. That's up to the company or the organizations that are curious about it. Um, so I'd be curious to see what your issues were with the previous one. So, but
Maybe it
either
was just
actually,
a confusion on my side. When I read, I overlooked maybe the spec. Maybe I
oh,
missed
gotcha,
some.
gotcha. Yeah. I mean, but it's also fair that you don't have to go back and look at it either or remember it because like that spec is now replaced by this spec, right? So it'd just be a waste of time to be honest. But yeah, but please look at it and see if anything stands out to you because yeah, like definitely the more feedback that we get, the better. This did go through a bunch of security folks, just to let you know. So we did get vetted by, I mean, a lot. Like I'm saying, like principal, like level security engineers here at Apple. So I'm pretty confident in at least the security of it. But like in terms, like security and usability, like like sometimes they don't really go hand in hand. So please, reach out and if you see any potential issues. But like I said, like I'm coming at it more from a UX standpoint. So I'm like, okay, this looks completely doable from an SDK point of view. So but yeah, like I said, we did implement it just like as a Go SDK, because that's the language that both me and the security team was very familiar with. So just to let you know. And what else? I think that's pretty much it in terms of 0.5. Well, I'll say that version uh issue, which I don't remember the issue, will version to be renamed to spec version. I will also do this. I can create a PR internally today and probably get it out to OSS today, but no promises. Worst case tomorrow is my thinking. And then we should be ready for 0.5. And oh yeah, we'll be consistent and PR will go out after this meeting. Okay, so those are the two things
Who
there.
will do the release after the merge of those two PR? I mean, renaming changing the version,
Yeah.
etc. Andrea or you?
I think Andre, but I'm gonna be present. And if you also want to be present just to see how the release is, that's fine too. But I understand you didn't want to like do maintaining or anything, like you don't want to take more on your plate, which that is fine. But I was gonna be present just so I know what the procedure is. That way we don't have to say, hey, Andrea, can you do this release? We can just do it when it's ready, right? So that's going to be the goal. So I'm going to shadow Andrea just to understand the release process. And while he's doing that, I'm probably going to record it and then document it after the fact, so we have it somewhere, and then we can publish those docs somewhere, maybe in an internal GitHub or something. So yeah. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I just say it's like a fun fact that um, we define CDEvents and for continuous delivery, etc. And we do everything manually. A lot of stuff is done manually.
Yeah. Well, the main reason is because we kind of shot ourselves in the foot, is that we have, n number of SDKs, but they all behave very differently and are generated very differently. So that's
Oh,
number.
I talk about the spec itself.
Oh, the spec itself. Oh, you mean just like releasing that?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm unsure why that is or what the process is, but yeah, I completely agree. It's also understandable we're not 1.0 too. So like, we want to definitely pick our battles. And if we had, I guess the question or the answer to that is, if we had releases going out every month, but like the last time we did a release was 1 year ago. So that, like, solving for continuous delivery right now, it might not be too beneficial. So I think once we start getting more releases out the door, that's definitely a problem that we need to solve sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think that is definitely just something to look out for. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all I had. Was there anything else that you had or you wanted to discuss?
No, I start but didn't finish to read
Oh,
your
definitions.
PR about definition. Yes.
Okay.
Uh, um,
Let me bring that up
I have
actually.
a different perspective. Maybe instead of focusing on
Oh,
verbs, I could say, or stage, focusing on artifact. Maybe it could be the software, because we try to create a model for software delivery, and I think we should maybe focus on software, but maybe not just software, because when I read your your definition, one thing I saw, it's what about delivering spec, open API that are part of the software. Sometimes we test are also delivered by another team and are part of they are packaged as could be packaged as a software. So I'm thinking about this maybe this approach.
Use cases,
And
yeah.
and
So can we
software are
before
also built and assembled from other software. And in your description, we this feeling of build is to make executable. You mentioned executable, an executable artifact. I remember,
yeah, yeah.
and I think it's more than that. It could be
Sure.
a
I
plugin,
but the
model, maybe data. So build is for me is a transformation, but it's I have to refine my own my
yeah,
own.
and well, let me step back before I propose this next question because I was going to propose a question, but I want to first understand the first part of what you said because it kind of like went over my head. I didn't really understand what you meant. You said um we should focus on software. What do you mean by that?
On the on soft on the not the software but artifact on the element. And what we want to help is people to to track the life cycle of the artifact, the software, dataset. If because we want
Oh, I see. So you're saying
helps
like the goal.
the,
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
to focus not on the step but on the object itself that goes through the step and say this, in the CD event approach is the subject versus verbs.
Yeah, yeah. I
In
understand
your
that.
definition, you build, store, test are for me are verbs in the life cycles of the software. I
Yes.
test the software, I build the software, I store the software.
So so yeah, so I want to kind of like explain kind of the gist of it and why we started with these. So the main issue, it doesn't matter what you have for the artifact because if tools have different definitions for everything, even if they have the same definition for artifact, if someone has a different build definition from another tool, you can't change those tools out. Like it just, you would break instantly because like they would produce totally different CD events, right? So, that's why in terms of interoperability, when you have a build, it always produces the same thing. That's kind of the whole goal because they all have the same notion of what a CD events build is. We're not redefining what build is. Like for example, what a tool can have their own build definition, but when they're sending a CD events build, they need to adhere to our definition. Otherwise, interoperability will be impossible to achieve. So that's why we started with these three basic concepts first. And then we're going to move on to basically the nouns because once we have the idea of like what the flow looks like in between, system to system, we can start defining like what is an artifact, what is a pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we started here. And I'm not saying your way is not wrong, but we wanted to first start with a consistent definition. So people, when we say build, when we're talking about build, we all have the same idea of what a build is in terms of CD event. So that's kind of like why we started here. If that helps at all. But I do understand like your point. I think it's just coming at it from a different side, but it kind of, accomplishes almost the same thing, or you're going to run into the same issues because once you start tracking the life cycle and the steps, like you said, of the artifact, if people have different definitions of the step, the artifact, like sure, will, make it to the end goal or end point of wherever it is. But if you end up switching out a tool that produces a different set of steps, no longer will those things be completely interoperable, right? Like you can't just swap out tools. So that's kind of the issues, unless there's a perfect intersection, right? So that, or intersection or produces more events that may or may not break this other systems. But the whole goal is that when you see a build event, it provides or it sends out these basic CD events, these core CD events always. None will ever be missing. So that's going to be the end goal. But in order to get there, we need to first define what these verbs are before we get to the nouns. Hopefully, does that make sense? And I do, define some of the nouns here because we do need to define the nouns as we're talking about them. But I wanted to kind of illustrate why we kind of went with this approach. I think this is the least common or the path of least resistance to getting to interoperability.
Yes.
But yeah, like I said, just like dig through it, read through it. And like I said, it's a lot of the times, like when we're reading specs, there might be also more than one way to solve a particular problem, right? And well, this is not really it is solving a particular problem, but in this case, you can't really show like which one's more efficient. So we kind of need to like open up, like, okay, if this is the way, if this is the way that's being proposed to like, solve this particular problem, unless there's like a real clear efficiency reason, we should probably, just take a look at this. Or, I understand that you're saying that you're not gonna not look at it, but what I'm getting at is, I understand that there's multiple solutions, but I think starting here is just, the one of preference. And two, I think this makes the most sense, at least for me, to get to interoperability. So that's kind of like why I landed on this. Oh, me and Didisi.
If it's in if we focus on the purpose of interoperability, my point is that since I learned informatics, computer science is all about transformation, input, output. So if we want to have interoperability, it means that those step transformation should clearly define what are the input, what are the output. Because in terms of, you mentioned the ability to replace maybe a block, a step by another block, another implementation. And I guess it's in the concept, in the context of conduit or similar tools. So it's to say, oh, I replace Jenkins by Tecton,
right,
whatever. So in this case, and it's what you already start to do, it's to clarify what are the input, what are the output.
Right. Maybe. So yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you. Yeah, because in order to have input and output, right, you need to define the system or the step that's doing the transformation. And in this case, like build would be the thing that's doing the transformation, right? So that's kind of the thinking there. But it sounds like we're on the same page because that's exactly how we thought about it, is inputs versus how inputs generate the same outputs, essentially, is the end goal.
And in this case, we are more like data ops, where some workflow system define each step by input, output. It's there are a lot of debate in the data engineering ecosystem about tools, but this is one of the point where they say we should be clear about what are the input and what are the output to be able to chain those transformation. This one is to lint, to test, or maybe, and for test,
but if you don't,
the output is a report, is a result. The input are the software and the test, by example.
Yeah, but you're jumping ahead though, because if you don't define what test is, it doesn't matter what the inputs or outputs are.
No, because as you mentioned, we could.
What if my test has build in it? Like, what if my test is a build plus a test? That would make no sense. The input and output would always be different versus someone that has a different version of test, right? You need to define what test is.
It's you could have a lot of kind of test or transformation between.
Yeah, but you need to define tests first in order to specify the inputs for a test. That's why, like, when you do CS, right, you don't just start with inputs and outputs. You start with like a system, right? Well, usually it's a very simple system that just converts an input A to like an input B, but you start with that system that has a function, right? That is the important bit, is that function. That's what we're defining. Otherwise, if you have a definition, right, like you just start with input and output, then that's just not as useful, right? Because you need to understand what that function does, right? Or is.
In functional programming, no. Some extremists say no, just the input and the output, because the output should be clear enough. The type of the output are clear enough to say what you are. In case of test, you can say the output is a performance result. It could be a series of test results, success, etc. Test suite.
No,
So
it doesn't. No, it doesn't matter because even in functional program, you still have to have similar names or concepts. Though, like if you have a build event, right? Like it doesn't matter what your inputs or outputs are at that point. If you have inconsistent, like it would be like let me try to give a concrete example.
If you have a build event and you want to replace by another build, it means that the output is always the container image, for example. So you
Yeah.
expect that it will be always the container image. It will be always a deployment, a deployable maybe artifact or a jar or
Yeah.
dataset or
I
whatever.
agree. I agree. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yes, that's gonna come. That's the second part of this, but we still first need to talk about definitions of the thing because, like, when we say input and output, okay, so what you're saying is a set of inputs always has the same set of outputs, which is exactly the end goal that we want to get to. But the problem is when we say people don't talk like that, when someone's coming up to you, let's say I'm Jenkins, right? We're not going to say, hey, the CD events that constitute builds, like they were not going to say that. They're going to say, or in your case, they would have to say CD events dot build dot publish build dot test, and they would have to list all of them and say these, and then this output. That would be like that's how they would need to say build, right? We need to short circuit that. We need to say build, right? Means these sort of inputs and these sort of outputs, right? And we first need to describe what a build is and then say these are the inputs that go into it and these are the outputs that go into it. And if you don't remember, we already did that or started doing that in an issue and you commented on it, I think, which was part of, let me see here. Did you see this? It's this. So we already started doing this, but we wanted to define these concepts in general. Like, see this here. And this is a set of inputs, and these are a set of outputs. So we already started doing that, but we wanted to first say, hey, build, right? We need to say this build segment is these inputs and these outputs, but we first want to tell people where to go. If you're doing a build, this is what constitutes that thing, though, and those events, right? Because technically, you could have these, if you don't define what a build is, someone might have a test and they could still use these same events and produce these same outputs, right? Like, because they could use these as long as they have the same input and same outputs, they can make a test system be a build system with your definition, right? So we need to define what build is.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense, but it's how to implement and integrate and not. I start to think that build is not the only steps or etc. So
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree. And what I should do is in this PR or in this, where'd it go? Let me actually add a comment
because
to.
if I remember, you start working this definition because we also have a discussion between build and artifact package, for example.
Yeah,
And
well,
package.
that actually isn't I actually started working on this way like maybe 6 months ago. So way before this, like way before that. So I've been working on this for a long time. So well, in my head at least, with the DC, it wasn't just me by myself, but yeah. So we've been working on these definitions for a very long time. Um, and and when I saw that artifact, and I'm just like, oh, we need better. I'm like, I've already been thinking about these definitions. Maybe I should just publish them now. But like I said, I've only been thinking about these three. And that's why I was like, I'll just publish these now so we can get to artifact, for example, right? So that's kind of like the thinking there. And then I
To,
posted
to, be,
this here. What's that?
to be honest, today for me, artifact, it's the most useful and clear definition in CDEvents.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the one I use to at the core of a lot of dashboard, etc.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's artifacts a little bit easier to get away with because I think I can't think of another tool that has a different definition, but it's like once you start getting into like build and like test and deploy, things become a little bit more fuzzy. And so and I agree. I think, we started with these three because these are just like the common denominators of the SDLC steps at least. And I mean that's why I at least started with them and then kind of wanted to expand on that. But these aren't going to be the only definitions too. This is just the start of it. The next set of definitions will be like artifact, which we'll just probably take what's already exists and then just add it to this document and then also add it to the spec pages as well. So we have a paragraph that's very clear that it's going to look like this, like inside of like the spec, we're going to have this.
Today,
Yeah.
artifact is the output of your store, in fact.
Yeah.
The only way to identify an artifact today is through the store.
Yeah.
It could be GitHub, it could be Docker Hub, it could be whatever, but it's through the store, the location of the artifact.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I'll need to think about it because I haven't thought too much about artifact. I'll probably come back and ask you to get your opinions, once we start expanding the definitions. But I want to first get this approved and in before I start thinking about more definitions. But yeah, I think artifact will be one of the more easier ones, definitely. But we can cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, so that's kind of the thinking there. Like why this is important, is when we're talking about build from system to system, it always means these set of things. And then also with this whatever. Here we go. With the help of this, we should say these are the inputs, these are the expected inputs and expected output. Oh, this is just the example of this. It's going to look like this sometime in the future. We just haven't done a formal definition of these things. So, but yeah. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yes, but I need to read again.
Okay. And feel free, like I said, I understand like the whole artifact approach as well. And I understand why you started there because if it's the one that is the most clearly defined, you probably want to start there, right? So I totally get it. But I think we coming at it from like an interoperability strategy from like all these different tools, I want to make sure because like I'm going to start going to a lot of conventions to promote CD events that when someone comes up to me and starts talking about build, we're talking about the same thing because you don't know how many times, we're talking about build or, like deploy or even test, and they have some sort of different definition. I'm like, they're like, no, build, test is part of build. I'm like, no. That's a different set of events, right? Like they're like, no. And so that's why I want to make it very clear on what these things are. So when people read CDEvents and they come and ask me questions, or at least when they approach me, they'd be like, oh, and they start talking and they realize they have the wrong definition. I'd be like, hey, go check out this link. It has all of our definitions of CDEvents, and we can, then follow up with like a set of different discussions on whatever issue that you might be having or questions that you might be having. So that's kind of the goal is because I've been going to these conventions, I get a lot of feedback and I realize like halfway through talking with them that they have a totally different definition. And it's usually build that's the issue is that people have completely different issues with build. I'm just like, or completely different definitions of build. I'm just like, oh, I realize we need a common denominator, a common definition before we start talking about these things. And so to be able to market CDEvents more appropriately, this is, I feel like, kind of like a good step in that direction as well.
Yes, but I still think that for interoperability, etc., we have to be clear on the output because, as you mentioned, build is this.
Oops.
But what is expected by a tool that will just consume build is I I don't care, maybe except for maybe monitoring or something. Maybe I don't care about the build event itself, but I'm more interested by what was built and where I can use the result of the build.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And for your tool, that makes a lot of sense. Because that's what you're tracking a lot of the time, right?
Yes,
So,
for me, yes, but I think about tools like Conduit or maybe to Shine. It's for the consumer of this event is okay. Something as was built where I can grab it or retrieve it, knowing that it was built. It's if it's built and disappear, it's useless. I
oh yeah,
could
yeah. But that's the thing, though. You just said it builds and it disappears, but then you want to understand what series of events cause that disappearance, right? Like it being able to get those
when I
particular.
say disappear, it's the result of the build is ephemeral. It exists only at the end of the build. Say okay, it's just I'm able to build if I'm able to build the artifact, but I didn't publish it. I didn't
Gotcha, gotcha. You just
make
meant
it.
like an ephemeral, like,
Yes.
yeah, something that isn't persistent or static. Yeah, that makes total sense. But like I said, that's only one UX or one use case that people are going to use, right? That's not the only one. People are going to
Yeah.
be interested in metrics. People are going to be interested in looking at the life cycle of all the steps. They're going to be asking, like, why are we building for one artifact 20 times the same build over and over, right? They might be asking those type of questions. They might be asking like, hey, when we do this publish, I noticed that we're also sending events over here and people are consuming that. Do we and they might be saying, do we need to focus on that because a lot of people are interested in that integration, right? So there's a lot of value that is outside of just the artifact where it lives, right? Like that's only one part of the whole story. And it really depends on what your goal as a manager, as a user, and these goals, even if you're on the same team, might be completely different. Like, for instance, me and you being a developer, we care about that last where it went, right? But someone that might be a director, they might care about when a ticket got created and was it ever closed when that build was deployed, right? So it's like they have different goals and wants for CDEvents, and we just need to make sure that um when we solve for that, we're not like narrowing in on one specific use case. We need to think about all the different possible use cases that people might have, right? So that's kind of like I think the how I'm at least trying to approach it. And that with that said, I sometimes someone will come up to me with a use case. I'm like, hell, I didn't even think about that use case, and then I kind of like store it in my back pocket because I need to think about it when we're creating specs and when we're thinking about these definitions. So and I hope that can help understand like where I'm coming from, is more from not just a single use case, like looking at where the artifact is, which is probably one of the more important use cases, but not the only use case is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I agree on it, but it's just to say that we should just take care of several use case and not vanish some information.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. And I think, all the use cases like they can be solved, with CDEvents as is. But the problem is it's just that we have like so many different definitions for build that we just need to standardize on it. That way, like when the director is
Yes.
looking at build, right? He's like, what the hell is build? And then we have a clear definition of that, because like for us, me and you, build might be very, very obvious, but like once you start getting to levels, that once you can become a two or three levels higher where you're removed from the product, that might be a less obvious, especially if we have like little quirks in our definition, right? So that's why we want to make these as clear as possible too. So I think there's a lot of benefit to doing this. But yeah, and like I said, but when you're thinking about this, when you're coming up with the some ideas or questions or different ways of thinking about it, feel free to post that in the GitHub issue as well, because I think those are really good discussions to have, right? Because it really shows that we're looking at this from multiple angles and not just one angle too, right? Because the importance with that is, even though this is the way that I thought of, your way could have, could be better, right? And I want to take the time to at least digest it, because unfortunately with me, I'm not I usually have an answer, like an actual concrete answer, the next day, because I want to spend a day thinking about it, or sometimes even a week, maybe more, So you
Same
might,
for me.
yeah, yeah. So you might post it on GitHub, because what I'm getting at is, when you ask it here, like a complicated question like that, I'm just giving what my intuition is probably saying is more likely,
Yeah.
right? But if you said it on the GitHub like last week, I would have thought about it for a very long time, and I would be like, oh, okay, this
Yes,
is,
it's something I have to work on. It's to write more about my
oh, your
thoughts.
thought process. Yeah, yeah. I mean, me too, though. Me too. So yeah, but like I said, that's just kind of like how my brain works. I wish I was one of those. Like, I have some coworkers that are just really good at like being able to answer complex questions like immediately and quickly. But I'm like, let me think about it for a little bit. Like, and then a lot of times, it's like, oh yeah, you're right, But then sometimes like, I'm like, yeah, you're right, like 50% of the way, but there's this other part of the problem, So like, there's different benefits for both ways, but I'm more of the slow, like I want to think about everything in the whole system in a holistic approach, as well as like thinking about every little piece too. So and it sounds like you're in the very similar mindset. So yeah, I think with the answer that I gave you, that probably makes the most sense in terms of why we went with, these three definitions, as opposed to like looking at just the artifact lifecycle. But in terms of like the inputs and outputs, like we are also working out on that as well. And I should have actually linked, like I said, I did link in the PR, but and another thing, I didn't understand what you were originally asking, so I'm sorry about that. I feel like we wasted a good 10 minutes just trying to understand each other.
Yes.
But once I understood what you were talking about, yes, we are working on that too. But yeah, but you're absolutely right. What is most important is that we have inputs and outputs that are consistent and mean, and have and I'm taking that one step further, is that these set of inputs and outputs have an actual meaning inside of a system. So yeah. But that's kind of the gist of that, the definitions. And like I said, feel free to tack it. I'm looking as much feedback as I can from it. And I'm don't know if Andre had a chance to look at it, but he's been pretty busy these last like several months. So I'll have you and Luke probably look at it. And then if worst case, let's give it like a 2 week window. Let's say for the definitions PR. Let me see here. Definitions PR. Let me post this here. Oh, let's try to close this. Um, Try to come to some decision by, well, let's just make it October. Was that was a good day. Let me find. Okay, that's 21st. By the 21st. So 2 weeks from now. Do you think that'll be enough time?
Yes. After we will have to see how to integrate this into the CDEvents spec, because we also have this issue that was highlighted by your pair, is where are the information between CDEvents dev, the website, and the
Yeah,
spec repository,
exactly. Yeah.
and how to have this consistency.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually talking with Andrea about that, because, people don't think to go look at that website. So it's like we need a way, like an automated way that like kind of copies the website in some way and puts it inside of the spec somewhere, or at least some of the pages, so people know when they're looking in GitHub, it's all in one place, or at least linked to the website, right? So people
Yes.
know where to find that information.
And it remember me that I have another question for you. Last year you mentioned that you work on Pickle and how to use Pickle to generate
Yes.
JSON file. It is something that you can share or not?
Oh, I can, but I have to get approval first. I can do that.
Or just
Yeah.
give me some link, because one of the, it's why I think I talk about it. One of the stuff that could be interesting today for me is if we are able to copy documentation from the documentation, to copy inside the JSON schema or etc. the description, etc. Because today where we generate SDK, we generate SDK from the spec for some of them, but as the JSON schema, from the JSON schema, sorry, but the JSON schema doesn't include the documentation.
Right,
So we
right,
generate SDK without any documentation. At least we could just link and say, hey, you have the description of build, of
right,
package, of
right.
resource at this place, but it could ease a user, maybe user of JSON schema and user of SDKs in the future.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely am all for documentation and writing it only once. So, yeah, I will. Let me get back to you. I'll try to get back to you today, but I might be busy, so it might need to be maybe
No,
tomorrow or
no
end of the
urgent.
week. But I'll try to share what I have because I had a whole POC for it, which it does a few of the things already. It doesn't do documentation, but you could probably take what I did and easily add it. Okay. So yeah, I'll work on it. I'll
Just
get those approvals.
I'm curious because I don't saw on the web clear way to generate several JSON schema from one pickle file, for example. So maybe I
Oh
miss
yeah, yeah,
some.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I will show you how to do that. I didn't do that for this one because I kept it as simple as possible. But if that's a use case that you are really interested in, that's something I can do.
Yes, no urgency. No,
Okay.
just
Yeah,
if you want.
I'll try to get it by the end of this week. I'll put it on my calendar and then we can sync back up. I'll ping you once I have an
Yes,
answer,
yes,
and then we could talk about it if you're interested in learning, like, or if if you have any questions, we can talk about it in Slack then.
yes.
All right, cool. Was that all you had, or was there anything
No,
else?
no, it's okay.
All
It's
right,
fine.
cool.
Thanks for your time.
All right, no, thank you. Always good, talking with you. It's always good, seeing, the interest in CD events here. And like I said, I'm going to try to start going to more conferences to help promote CD events. So, I'll try to make it over to Europe as well. Cause, that way, me, you, if you're interested, as well as Andrea, can all meet up and we can talk about CD events. So,
Yes.
but yeah, all right, man, I'll talk to you later then. All right.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks again, David. All right. Have a
Bye.
good one. All right. Bye.
Bye, Ben.